welcome to another edition of The Bleeding Edge of Digital Health. I'm your host, Mike Moore, and have a really exciting guest today with a fascinating product, category-creating product. Our guest is Dr. Qamar. Dr. Qamar, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you, Mike. Nice to be here.
Yeah, no, we've very much been looking forward to this. We had this on the books a while back, and the powers that be with the tech gods were not in our favor, so we had to postpone it and reschedule. So I'm really appreciative of you being so flexible time wise and whatnot. The company that Dr. Qamar founded and also was the CEO of up until just recently is a company called MedWand. When I stumbled across the company, I immediately knew I had to track you down and get you on the show. This is, I think, a product that's almost perfectly emblematic of what I want to really showcase on this podcast, which is truly differentiated, category creating products in digital health that will really alter the way in which physicians treat medicine and alter the landscape of care. So I'm really excited to have you on the show today. What I thought we'd start with, Dr. Qamar, is just to have you do kind of a brief intro to the company and and how you got in, how you got involved, how this thing evolved. Just a little bit of a brief background there would be a great place to start, and then we can dig into the nitty gritty of the cool product and all that.
Sure, just call me Sam or Samir. My mother calls me Dr. Qamar when she's upset, so we can hold up on that. But no, thank you for
You
having
got
me.
it.
As everybody knows now, during and after the pandemic, telemedicine has become a common thing, but it wasn't always common. It had been growing steadily for a very long time, and we talk about telemedicine as an industry that just started about 10, 15 years ago, but the truth is far from it. Telemedicine has been around as long as you've had long distance communications and doctors. So 22 years ago, when I was in residency at Penn, I would take a call from my call room in the middle of the night from a patient who was thinking about whether or not he or she should come into the ER based on symptoms. And I'd be here in my scrubs, hoping that I wouldn't have to get out of bed at 3:30 in the morning for an
Right.
admission. But of course, I had to make sure that everybody was okay where they were calling from. And you had to sort of make an assessment of the patient's condition over the phone. And I can't tell you, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one, but every single resident physician ever has probably wished for some way to better assess the patient remotely, such as I had wished when I was in
And every
residence.
patient.
And every patient, because let's face it, who wants to drag up, sick and go to the emergency room for gas when they're thinking it's a heart attack? So it it has been going on for a long time, and in the early 2000s, with the advent of the iPhone and FaceTime and texting becoming more commonplace, the internet speeds increasing, broadband speeds increasing, you saw a greater utilization of technology for medical purposes. That evolved into what we know as telemedicine today. Except that even then, telemedicine has been mainly confined, Mike, to just two-way video communication. There's really nothing to do with examinations or vital gathering capabilities, which is not good. A few years ago, before I started MedWand, I was invited by Google to serve as an advisor to them for telemedicine. And one of the things that I was not happy about was that this incredibly wonderful company that had a lot of money, unlimited resources, that really believed in tech at the next level, even they didn't understand that examinations were a critical component of telemedicine that were being missed. And that to me was a double standard, you see, because in the real world, if you come in with a cough and a fever, you would at least expect me to listen to your lungs, get your temperature, maybe get a pulse ox, make sure you don't have COVID perhaps. You expect an examination of sorts when you come in. In fact, you would probably think very differently about a doctor who didn't examine you or put their hands on you when you were sick, and you would leave the office quite dissatisfied. Yet in telemedicine, we had shunned and basically ignored this whole critical component by saying, you know what, it's okay, Mike. You kind of look like you may have
Right.
bronchitis. Let me prescribe a Z-Pack.
Right.
And that's not the standard. The standard of care is to listen to someone's lungs, is to get their temperature, get their vitals, get data, right? And that wasn't being done. So you had telemedicine on one standard where examinations were not necessary, and you had clinical medicine, which everybody has known about since the beginning of time, where you do need an examination when you come in. They were both operating in parallel, and that bothered me as a doctor, as a futurist. So I decided to do something about it, and that's how the the spark for MedWand was started. And there's a story there about how it was started, but that's exactly why I decided to create something like MedWand.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, it's you talk about, a duality of expectations, right? Both patient and physician had certain expectations when you're present, and then, on this telemedicine thing, it's odd that there would kind of evolve a different set of expectations, or what would be deemed as acceptable. You mentioned that there was a story there. Is it one that you can share in prime time?
Yeah,
It sounds
sure.
like there might be a good one.
No, it's interesting. So I was formerly the house doctor for Pebble Beach. I had one of the first concierge medical practices in the country. And one thing you learn as a doctor about very busy people who are very successful is that they just don't have time or the inclination to come into a doctor's office unless it's absolutely necessary because they're busy. And so there was a lot of telemedicine being practiced there in that practice many years ago. And so I was doing a lot of telemedicine, if you will, by text and by FaceTime. That then led to my another company called MedLion, where we are actually a virtual primary care company in several states. And that again was a lot of telemedicine, if you will, without examination capabilities. That's when Google decided to work with us for a pilot project in Nevada. So this thing had stuck in my mind for quite a long time. And it wasn't until my sister called me from Chicago with a chest cold. Just like all brothers who are doctors, I guess, get calls from their family members. And she said, "Hey, bro, I'm not feeling well here. I'm coughing up a lung. Am I going to be okay?" And I said, "Look, sis, I love you to death, but I can't examine you. I wish I could listen to your lungs." And she said, "Well, hold on." And she took, I think it was an iPhone that she had, and she knew where the mic was on the iPhone. And she just put it up against her chest and really tight, created a seal, I guess, and took a few deep breaths, and I could actually hear her lung sounds.
No kidding.
And I said, "Oh my goodness, this is very doable." She's sitting in Chicago. I was sitting in Las Vegas, and I heard her lung sounds. There's got to be a better way to do this. It's possible. And I said, "Sister, you're going to be okay. Don't worry. You won't die. You'll be just fine. Take some antibiotics. I got to go. Bye." Hung up on her. Ran to one of my study desks at home where I had an old iPhone, took it apart. I'd never done that before. And I wanted to see where the mic was and how big it was. I wanted to see the camera, if that could be used for something. And I came to the conclusion, Mike, that we already have the technology to examine patients remotely. If you could take a mic, essentially, and amplify it, create a better seal, almost like a digital stethoscope, if you will, you could listen to someone's lungs, heart, belly, carotids, etc. Why not take the camera that's in the size maybe that's already in phones and use that to look inside someone's ears, nose, and throat? And there were other products that were doing something similar, but they were all sort of compartmentalized off into their own things. There was a remote, maybe otoscope. There was a remote digital stethoscope that was its own thing. There was maybe a pulse ox that was its own thing. But I, as a family doctor, wanted something that would combine as many of these features as possible. So I interviewed several engineering firms because I really thought this was possible. Came across one who I thought could do this. Essentially, found my co-founder that way, and we embarked on this mission to create a unified medical device that would house as many diagnostics as we could put in, uh, mainly for primary care purposes, because that's where most of healthcare is used today,
Right.
and build it. And that's what we did. It's taken almost 8 years now, and we
Wow.
are about to be FDA approved. It's right here in the palm of my hand. If it's sort of like an overweight computer mouse, if you will, but it has now a digital stethoscope. It has an EKG that can detect abnormal or normal rhythms, and we're working with artificial intelligence partners that can pick up on rhythms that are threatening. There's a high definition video camera at the front that can be used as an otoscope. You can look down your throat with it, and it also has a dermatoscope where we can measure skin lesions across time as well. It also has some basic vitals like your heart rate, your oxygen levels, and even a thermometer. And we could have put everything in here naturally. So we also put a Bluetooth in here that can be used to communicate with other devices and then funnel all the data in through the same software system. And, I talk about this now, 8 years later, very casually within 30 seconds as to what this does. But the amount of work and engineering that went into this is just incredible. And those who are in tech will know how tough this was. I learned as a doctor that I'm not an engineer. I didn't know anything about this sort of stuff, just the vision, if you will, which our very dynamic engineering team brought to reality. So that's the story behind how the spark for MedWand came about and what we ended up doing with it.
That's phenomenal. Who was the co-founder?
The co-founder is Bob Rose.
Oh, the
Uh,
president. You and Bob flip flopped. I spoke about that a second ago. So you and Bob just flip flopped positions within the company, or not flip flop,
we
but
did.
you just
We
moved him into the CEO role.
Yeah, we did, and the reason for that, quite honestly, was there's a time in every startup where the visionary, the founder, if you will, has to build that vision up all the way to a certain level. That takes a different skill set. One who's great at presentations, one who can have the ability to convey that vision, not just to one's team, but also to the masses, to sort of validate what this whole project is all about and have it make sense. When it got to the door of the FDA, that job was done. The
Yeah,
next phase for the company is now building the actual operations component. And we're in a very difficult time right now with the pandemic where supply chain management is an issue, shortage of microchips, etc. And Bob, who was in this with me from the very beginning, has been working at very large companies for a long time, doing exactly what we're about to do now with MedOne, which is going to factories, learning where the best parts come from, how to procure those parts, etc. And with that, he brings on a wealth of not just experience, but also connections in the engineering field, many of whom are on the team today. So it just made sense for him to take the reins now and take the company to the next level. And that's where we are today. I'm still active with the company, though. I'm still the chief medical officer, and it's the reason why I'm here today, conveying that vision to whoever will hear it.
well, it's interesting that it takes a lot of self awareness to be able to realize that. I always say, startups and almost each individual role within the initial startup team, you're kind of in business to put yourself out of business. And what I mean by that is very few companies are created with the thought that we're going to make the next Medtronic or we're going to make the next J&J out of this eventually. There's a liquidity event, you get acquired, you go public or whatever. But also most leaders, it takes a very unique individual to be the type of person that can take a company from an idea in their head to what Facebook is today or what Jeff Bezos did with Amazon. If you do a good job as a founder, the company outgrows your skill set. And the self-aware ones usually, like you did, take note of that and bring in somebody who's more well positioned to take that company from that point in time moving forward. We see it a lot too, where some leaders aren't quite as self-aware and really want to hold on to the reins, and that doesn't always end well. So I commend you for not only the self-awareness but also choosing the right partner in Bob from the get-go, somebody that was complementary in your skill sets and whatnot. So that's a neat story.
Yeah, no, it wasn't totally me. I can't take all that credit. It was a board decision, and you're right. It does take self-awareness to realize one's own limitations. It's important to put aside one's ego, if you will, for the benefit of the company. And let's face it. I'm 49 years old. This is my second startup, and if we can make such a splash now with this is just the beginning for me. And so I look forward to learning a ton about supply side management and all of that. And this isn't my last rodeo. I expect to do many other startups, and it's a nice way for me to start learning about the transition to the next step. But it's not a decision that came easily. I'll be honest. This is probably one of the most important projects I've worked on in my life, and it's been one of the most exciting. And I think the reason for that is because I think the most impactful companies that end up changing the world, Mike, are ones that come from founders who had the original vision for reasons that only they can explain.
Yeah.
It's more than a passion. There's a certain twisted logic that comes with the creation of a company, a product, a service that is seeded from the original founders. And so, but it's not my last project, and I have a feeling there are some that I'll be working on that are even going to be bigger than MedWand down the road. But we're in a very good place right now, and the goal is not to be CEO forever. The goal is to have the company do very well, and that's how you structure it, and that's why these steps had to take
What
place.
you described there about founders being able to see something that the rest of us can't at that point in time makes me think of that part in Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs, where he talks about the reality distortion field that Steve used to be able to make people see things that they couldn't see before, or understand a need that they might not have been able to envision before, but also be able to um, convince that individual that something is possible that they otherwise would have never attempted or dreamt of accomplishing. So it's definitely a unique ability of a lot of early stage founders. Let's just kind of go through the product real quick. As I was thinking about it in my head, I was before the call, I was thinking, what do you call this thing? It's my initial gut first blush reaction was a virtual diagnostic tool, or a remote diagnostic tool. But what do you call it? And then I had that you can take temperature, blood pressure, pulse ox, pulse rate, obviously, heart, lung, abdomen auscultations, EKG, and then obviously the visual with the ear, nose, and throat. Is there? Did I miss anything there?
Yeah, everything but the blood pressure is accurate. It doesn't take blood pressure.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it can ingest blood pressure data via Bluetooth via a connected device, just like it can do the same with glucometers and scales, perhaps. But no, it doesn't have blood pressure, not yet. I think that is something that could come later with non-invasive uh, light tricks that are being
Huh.
developed in technology right now down the road. But no, that's essentially it. And the
It's a
goal was
Swiss Army knife
it's been
of,
called that.
of
It's the Swiss
tools.
Army
Yeah.
knife of medical exams. And what's interesting is, as a doctor, when I conceived of this, selfishly, it was to be able to examine patients remotely. So you're absolutely right. It's a remote diagnostic device. It's a telemedicine diagnostic device, uh, but it became much more than that. And it's interesting when you're breaking into a new category of technology, one that the world really hasn't used or seen before. You have many challenges, such as not knowing which markets are going to adopt this the quickest, the most, etc. But you also have several advantages, and one of those advantages are that you can actually create entire industries. You can create entire segments. You can create your own markets. For instance, one of the things that MedOne does is eliminate geographical barriers to physical examination. What do I mean by that? That means that Mike doesn't have to drive 20 miles to the doctor's office to get his throat looked at. Okay, that's great. We can take it further. Mike can be in Venezuela on vacation and then log in to have Dr. Qamar take a look at his throat all the way down there across two continents. Or we take it a step further. If you end up going, I don't know, on a trekking mission to the Himalayas and you have broadband through Starlink, perhaps, I can examine you right there on Base Camp 1 for Mount Everest. So now we've
Wow.
just trespassed mountains and oceans. So you remove all geographic barriers. I mean, in a very, and I'm just limited to our planet Earth right now. The truth
Right.
is, we're also going to be working to do something like this in space as well. So we're thinking, sky's the limit, literally.
It's truly borderless.
It's borderless. It's like a telephone of medical exams. Uh, you can just examine anyone anywhere, really. And what that does is you've just created and unlocked an entire paradigm of medical practice that's never really been done before.
Right.
I suspect you're going to get an entirely new industry coming up soon called telemedicine tourism, where well-to-do families and individuals in emerging markets who need to stay there because they're doing so well and don't have the time to take first class and fly to New York to get examined, they're just going to get online and say, "Hey, doc, you're in New York. I'm in Hanoi. Can you please examine me here so I can take your opinion to the local doctor and let him know what's going on?" You may even get international practice of medicine. I mean, you're going to really come across a whole set of different things now. So that's wonderful. The other thing that's happened, though, is that the pandemic has really shown an enormous spotlight on the convenience of access to care via virtual means. And if anything that has been discovered during the pandemic by doctors and patients who were essentially forced to do telemedicine, they realized one of the biggest gaps in telemedicine today is the lack of ability to be examined. And now people understand why devices like MedWand exist. We were ahead of our time 8 years ago when this was conceived, knowing that eventually telemedicine was on a trajectory that would continue to grow. And noting that, we had to intersect that at some point with remote diagnostics. And that's exactly what we ended up doing. And now, so we are in a really good place with market timing when the world finally understands what telemedicine is and what its gaps are, and we can swoop in with our cape and show them MedWand.
But you couldn't have picked a better timing for it all, right? To expect FDA approval right after the first pandemic of the last, I don't know how many years. I mean,
Well, timing is everything. One of you have lots of startups that have tons of capital, lots of venture capital, and they sometimes just don't make it because the market timing isn't there, or the market hasn't really adopted what they're trying to do. You can have the best team, the best founders. You can have dynamic wizards who are CEOs that everybody is charmed by on stage. Means nothing if you don't have great market timing. And for us, it's exactly that. If MedWand had been made 6 years ago, we probably would have been a little bit earlier. And if the iPhone, for instance, had come out 10 years before the internet had broadband strength that it does now, it probably wouldn't have been as successful. So I strongly believe that the winds were in our favor when it came to the timing of how this ended up turning out to where we are today with the pandemic, which, by the way, still isn't over. And it's perfect for us. So we're pretty excited about being able to provide a solution to telemedicine gaps in a very important manner.
yeah. When you were talking a minute ago, I made a note here. I think it also it's I think this could go a long way in terms of the democratization of healthcare because you look at doctors that are going on you know charity missions to remote places or and let's say they or there's physicians in remote places that don't have access to the types of tools that are needed. It could bridge that gap as well. In addition to, the obvious benefit of, people want to see their own doctor. If a high-ranking, a powerful CEO is in Shanghai and not feeling well, there's a comfort in being able to call up Sam and say, "Hey, Sam, can you take a look at this? I'm not feeling well." There's a comfort level in receiving care from somebody that you trust versus somebody that you don't know. Doesn't mean that their physicians are any less qualified, or it doesn't even need to be out of the country. It could just be in a different part of our country. But there is certainly a comfort level with being able to see your own physician and let them be the ones calling the shots. That's for sure.
It's quite interesting. One of the things that I believe um, that we need to look at when we look at trends, and this is what I like to do. I like to try to imagine what the future is going to be like. And yeah, you can look at Star Trek and Star Wars and get some ideas from there. Because if you look at the Jetsons cartoons from the 1960s, a lot of those
Right.
what were created there is actually practiced today, which is interesting. So there is some science behind the science fiction, which ends up becoming reality. But you also look at trends in other ways. As a physician, I can look at medical trends from my perspective. As a patient, you can look at trends from your perspective. And let's just take something really simple, for instance, right now. And that is, most people just don't like going to the doctor's office.
Right.
It's that simple. And that's not true everywhere, by the way. That's only true in more industrialized countries where people have access to information on the internet that may tell them what they might have, and they see going to the doctors as uh, a necessary inconvenience to get that prescription, let's say. People don't like it, and that is not going to stop. I don't forecast a future where people are going to jump for joy to go to their doctor's office. Uh, I forecast a future where people are going to have more and more power as patients. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's not just about going onto Google. It's about going onto Google and then being able to connect with somebody who could do the prescription for you, or connect to an algorithm that can help tell you what you might have. That connects you to a doctor who can then help you get your medication delivered to your house, maybe in an hour. That kind of thing. And
More proactive approach.
exactly. And if I were to create another startup, and I'm always thinking of the next big thing, I think we have to dismantle the current healthcare infrastructure as it is understood today, because it's broken. It's the healthcare system doesn't work
Yeah, it's
today
broken.
the way it's supposed to. And we have MDs like myself who are authorized legally to prescribe medication based on our training. But you also have other things out there. You have artificial intelligence that can be used to digest enormous volumes of medical textbooks and create, if you will, machine learning, so that it comes up with potential differential diagnoses for the patient. Those tools can be used. You have other tools like MedWand that can be used to be examined from a distance. But you put all that together after dismantling, and what do you get? Well, I think healthcare is going to look very different in about 20 to 30 years. It's not going to be your stereotypical, I'm sick, let's go to the doctor's office, let me get a treatment, thank you very much, goodbye, come back next month. No, I think it's going to be very different. I think you're going to have medical care taking place in between doctor's visits, because let's face it, doctor's visits should just be corrective measures. The real medical care takes place in between. I need to know what you're doing when you're opening your fridge. I need to
Right.
know when you're smoking, if you're drinking. I need to know if you're exercising. I want to know what your blood pressure is when you're sleeping at night without you having to come into my office. And I think advancing technology is eventually going to be created in a way where primary care will be redefined, not by family doctors or nurse practitioners or pediatricians. No, primary care is going to be defined by technology that patients use, that's FDA approved, to come to healthcare decisions, which then have to be passed on to medical professionals. We're going to become secondary care. Primary care is what you're going to do yourself with certified algorithms and machine learning and AI and technology like MedWand. And then to take it to the next level, because you can't practice medicine necessarily, you take
Right.
it to a doctor who can then take over from there and help you, and all without leaving your house, by the way. I think eventually visits to the doctor are going to be left to just procedures and those types of things. In the same way we did that with banking. I mean, electronic banking today, you can deposit a nice big check straight from your cell phone,
Yep.
and you can do a lot from your cell phone when it comes to your banking app. But you still have those bricks and mortar facilities for a reason. It's nice to be able to go in and talk to the manager of the bank for something big that you might need signatures for. Sometimes you just have to go to the bank. And I think for that to be an analogy, you're going to have bricks and mortar facilities as well in medicine, but you're also going to have a ton of technology that's going to work for the benefit of the patient, to basically recreate healthcare in a different way from what we see it today.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's a trust but verify environment, where patients are going to trust the instinct of the technology, but then they'll also verify with a physician, and obviously treatment will be
Exactly.
allocated accordingly. Physician visit of the future would look like, and it's going to look a lot different. That patient's going to grab a cup of coffee, sit down at their coffee table, log into the telehealth visit, grab the MedWand device, and you're going to guide them through whatever diagnostics that they need to communicate or relay to you as a physician that the doorbell will ring. It'll be a representative from Git Labs who will come in and take a blood panel from in their living room on their sofa, and then any prescriptions that are to be administered will be sent through a function like Alto Pharmacy, where an hour later a representative will show up from Alto in a brown paper bag will be the medicines that you deemed necessary. That's not that far off.
No, I call it my
We're
theory of
almost there.
telemedicine. It is. I think there are 4 steps to a doctor's visit. There's the initial sitting down and talking about what's going on. That's the history session. There's the part where I say, "Mike, let's get you up on the examination table here so I can listen to your lungs," and so forth. The third step is data gathering, whether it's tests or vitals or so forth. And the last step is delivery of treatment. And once all that's been done, the doctor will perform a diagnosis and treat you accordingly. Uh, so there's the communication, there's the examination, there's the testing, and there's the treatment. Those are the 4 steps in the doctor's office, really, when you break it down. Telemedicine really is not going to be successful unless you can put all of those 4 steps and produce that virtually, seamlessly. And you have telemedicine today, which is mainly video chat, kind of like what we're doing right now.
Yep.
That's step one. It's sort of where it's stuck right now until recently. And so MedWand comes along, and we're able to examine you now, which is basically getting you up on the table so I can listen to your lungs, your heart. We can get some vitals from you as well. That's step 3. So we sort of have done step 1, step 2, and step 3 with MedWand.
Wow.
Step 4, which is delivery of treatment, that can be Alto or capsule, or even I think Uber is now starting to get into delivery of medications with Uber Heals. I think there are some companies out there which are poised to take all of these things and combine them into a singular experience for the patient. So essentially, you're sitting on your couch, you're not feeling well, you get up onto your computer, doc comes on, talks to you, you pull out your MedWand, so you're examined, some vitals are taken, doc performs diagnosis, and then you have medication delivery straight to your house. And Amazon's working on doing something instantaneously where you can just get it fulfilled and it comes to you. I think PillPack, that was acquired by
Yep.
Amazon, is working on those types of things. So there are lots of companies doing that. I don't think anyone does it seamlessly yet. I think there are some candidates out there like Optum or even Teladoc Health that could potentially do it, uh, and maybe even Amazon Care as it grows.
That's what I was thinking.
That's where the future is in the near future. By the way, it's not too far away because you have many companies doing everything separately, but nothing together. But again, as I said earlier, I think we're going to be looking at Medicare leaps ahead of that, where you won't need to be examined for everything. Really, you might be wearing a jacket or pods or your sunglasses, which are consistently monitoring your vitals. Might send an alert to your cell phone and say, "Hey, Mike, something's going on with your heart rate. Check it out," and you'll know what to do. Or you might even send a text to your doctor. So I think lots of things are going to be automated with technology. It's going to be a sensor-based world moving forward where you don't even know that you're being monitored. You
Yeah.
know, but you don't know. Nobody else knows, and
There's
except for
not
your doctor.
constant reminder of it.
No, it's just it's what your body already does naturally. Uh, your hormones, your blood pressure, everything is always working in harmony because it's a living machine, the human body. And the pancreas is doing its own thing. The brain's secreting its own thing. There are certain enzymes going here and going there to control your blood pressure, break up clots regularly. You don't even know that's going on. People don't
Right.
even know that their immune system's fighting off infections every day that they have, and they don't even know it. Uh, that's health. And to replicate that with technology is a pretty cool thing, I think. And I think that's where we're going in the future.
Yeah, it's neat because the same way MedWand or these sunglasses with sensors in them that send out signals or alerts that something's wrong. Our body does that through symptoms, right? It's just it's a different type of alert. You start getting a fever, that's your body telling you something. You're getting the equivalent to an alert pop up on your iPhone. This is one thing that I was really interested in because I could see this being sold again not too far off in the distant future in an Apple store. I like that to me is like an almost eventually a no-brainer. Let's say you got FDA approval today. Um, how would this work in practice? Is this the type of thing where if I had an appointment scheduled for you on Thursday, Tuesday you would FedEx out me a MedWand, and then I on Thursday we would do the telehealth visit. I'd put it in the prepaid shipping box and send it back to you guys, or how would that operate?
Yeah, there are many use cases, Mike, for MedOne. One of the things that we discovered early, again, going back to our discussion about markets and breaking into new industries or breaking new industry, is you don't know where your markets are. And we had to be open minded as to where the receptivity would come from with MedWand. Initially, it's quite well known that telemedicine wasn't as adopted by society by and large. I mean, the utilization for telemedicine with employers is like less than 5%, and is an issue. This is pre-pandemic, of course. That's increased a little bit now because people know what telemedicine is, and we're not as scared with technology now with broadband and connecting on Zoom to see what's going on. So initially, we thought and we made a decision together as a team to go B2B as opposed to B2C. And there are some other remote diagnostic companies out there that saw a market in B2C. That's fine. We decided to focus on B2B. And again, my bias as a physician comes into play. I believe that being able to adequately examine someone accurately is critical when it comes to decision making from a clinical standpoint. And if I were to guess between doctors and patients who more wanted diagnostic capabilities remotely would probably be clinicians who are afraid of making the wrong call. And there are greater consequences to that than lack of convenience, for instance, with patients not wanting to come in. We decided to go to B2B. Now the question then becomes, well, which B, right? So
Right.
while we were keeping our ears to the ground, there were some industries we guessed correctly on. So telemedicine companies who were only doing video chat, who wanted a competitive edge, a qualitative competitive edge over the competition when it came to examinations. Hospital systems are traditionally created to serve a population within a geographic area around that hospital. But what if you could go beyond that geographic area? What if hospital Mike and Sam that we have, uh, which is treating patients within a 50-mile radius, what if now we could take that out to 250 miles because we have telemedicine capabilities? You've just increased the scope of that hospital's care, which is great for business. Uh, and we then also came across other industries we had never even thought of. Shipping and freight companies, cargo ships, airplanes with airlines who didn't want to land
Schools.
their planes, schools, nursing homes, rehab facilities. So there are many others. And as we developed our product and we marketed ourselves internationally, uh, those people came to us. Those markets came knocking on our door, and we essentially really haven't had to have much of a sales department. It's all been incoming traffic since the very beginning, which is interesting. So we're pretty happy with that. Now, then came the pandemic, and now consumers did understand what telemedicine was. So we did pivot a little bit and also created MedWand integration capabilities with smartphones. That has also happened. So whereas you are correct in that in the future you can expect to see such devices at the Apple Store, at Best Buy, and so forth, right now we want to create an amazing, clinically accurate, medical grade device approved by the FDA that doctors and nurses can trust implicitly, explicitly when it comes to examining patients at a
Time
distance.
in and time out, they're going to get the right reading. It's not
You
going to be yeah.
Your life depends on it. And if even during this conversation we've had a few glitches with the video, technology when it comes to communication isn't perfect yet. And that's okay. We're getting better and better. This has to be perfect every single time. And
Right.
so if I'm doing virtual rounds at, say, the hospital because I can't get in quickly enough and I want to check up on my 5 patients who are uh, in the hospital right now, and all they have to do is I have to get the nurse to take the med wand by their bedside so I can examine them and listen to their lungs and heart, get their vitals. The nurse tells me the rest. I don't have to go in, and the quality of care goes up, but only if the device is accurate. So that's where we wanted to focus on the on the telemedicine industry and those industries which had already invested in telemedicine infrastructure and understood where the gaps were, where they could appreciate something like this and its high level of accuracy. But at the same time, I think, if for instance, Mike, that this is the same device I saw at my hospital bedside 5 months ago. Holy cow! Now they're selling this for me at my house. I want
Right.
one. Then it becomes more credible. And so we wanted to do sort of a top-down, if you will, approach with market segmentation. Go B2B first. That eventually goes to B2B to C, and then eventually will probably be B2C in the future as well. And MedWand is not the first such device. It's not going to be the last, certainly, but I think we are the best. And I say that with full conviction because as a doctor, I can't afford for you to get a wrong reading on this if your health and life maybe depends on this. It has to be accurate, or otherwise, I just throw it out the window. It's
Right.
it's meaningless otherwise. And
It'll do more harm than good at that point.
absolutely, and there's a lot of junk out there, which is not clinically accurate, and that's scary for me as a doctor and as a patient. So it has to be spot on every time, and that's what I'm proud to say is what we've done. And we're pretty excited about where we're going to change. I think you're going to see a lot of devices get inspired by what we're doing and create their own versions of MedOne and sort of so forth. And you know what? That's okay. It's good to be a pioneer that improves telemedicine for the better.
Imitation is the purest form of flattery. If somebody is bringing another product to market, all it's going to do is validate what you've already done. People love to throw that word disruptive around, but if you follow Christopher Lockheed and Nicholas Cole and the category pirate guys, this is really like a category creating product when you look at it from the perspective of all of the different functionality you've got with it. One thing that I was thinking in my mind was, there's so many different things that you could layer on top of this from the standpoint of AI, with the dermatoscopy, being able to, you know, upload that picture, overlay an AI program to it to see if it's likely melanoma or not. I mean, and that's not exclusive to dermatology. There's AI companies coming out every day with echo applications, et cetera. So I mean, it would seem that the opportunities are really endless in terms of regulatory process. How close do you think you are to FDA approval?
A couple of weeks away. We're very close. We've been working on this for a long time. On day one, MedOne was invented. On day two, we pulled up the FDA website to see exactly what needed to be done because we knew that for this to be clinically relevant, in any sense of that, it had to be FDA approved or cleared rather. And so it's not just the FDA we're working on; it's the CE for Europe and other regulatory agencies throughout the world because this is essentially a global device. So we're weeks away, and I can say that with full confidence because I'm part of the team that's sort of overlooking everything, and we're very excited. It took a while to get to that level because of the level of complexity in this, of course, as a class two medical device, and the multiple diagnostics that are in here that have to be vetted in terms of accuracy.
Yeah, it's
Because
like
of the
multiple
pandemic,
different. It's almost like multiple different approvals because you got it.
it is,
Each
it
one of the
is.
things has to be vetted to be accurate, etc.
That and it takes the most difficult part and puts everything under that umbrella. So if something didn't need approval, it does now because it's got another device in here. This is a singular device. So this is a class two medical device. And one of the other things that slowed us down, I was going to say, was the pandemic. There were labs where we had to get human trials done, and we couldn't because essentially lockdowns prevented that from happening. And so that delayed us a little bit. But then again, it the timing couldn't be better.
The biggest trends that I see in healthcare right now, especially in the hospital setting, is the transfer of care from the hospital to the home. That is crucial. I mean, there's so many initiatives, not only from the hospital side, but from industry side, creating the technologies that can facilitate this, right? The sensors, home sensors to monitor breathing, companies like Curie.ai that have pulmonology applications with AI software overlays, taking these patients and being able, they don't need to sit in a hospital anymore for 30 days and be monitored. They can sit in the comfort of their own home. And uh, it's technologies like this that are gonna really enable it. It's really neat. Well, want to wrap up here because I want to be sensitive to your time. Really appreciate you coming on, but I always like to give the guest an opportunity. You know, um, one of the main reasons why I created this show was I wanted to take what I think are the coolest technologies and put them front and center and put a big spotlight on them. You know, if somebody's listening to this and they want to acquire the capabilities, you know, when you guys get FDA approval, if somebody's listening to this and says, "Hey, MedWand's the kind of company I want to work for," what's the best way for people to reach out to the company and whatnot? If you you know, if you give some direction there, we'll make sure that that's in the show notes so people can reach out accordingly and in an appropriate fashion.
Thank you. Now, we have a website, medwand.com, and it sort of gives a summary of who we are, what we've done with this amazing technology, who the team members are, what their current positions are, and also contact information, which is the best way. But if they want to reach me directly, I don't mind putting my email out there. It's sqamar@medwand.com. Happy to answer any questions that I can, turf off questions that I can answer to my expert team members. And absolutely, we're very excited. Anyone who is interested in working with us, we are interested in working with them because it means, like us, they envision a very different future for healthcare that we're working towards.
Sam, you are an incredibly interesting individual. I don't know if anybody's called you that, but you might be the most interesting guy in the world. Or what's the Dos Equis? Yeah, the most. I think what's the commercial? The most interesting
Yeah,
man
that's
in the
it.
world. Um,
I
yeah,
haven't
no,
even told you about the 6 languages I speak and the 100 countries I've been to and all the other stuff that I've done. We'll save that for another day.
well, yeah, I think well, on our prior conversation, you had dipped your toe in those waters a little bit, which was probably where my mind was going with all that. But it's clear you've got a vision for the future that I subscribe to, but that certainly you've seen this much sooner than the rest of us. So, congratulations on what is undoubtedly going to be an incredible run ahead of you guys here as you get FDA approval. Can't wait to watch it from the sidelines, and definitely would love to stay in touch. And maybe we'll bring you back for a recap show a couple of years from now and recap. That was then, this is now, but also let's stay in touch on any future ventures for sure, because anything that you're going to be involved in has definitely got my attention. So,
Thank
my
you.
sincere thanks for coming on the show, and we'll definitely look forward to staying in contact moving forward.
Certainly. Thank you, Mike. It was a lot of fun.
Appreciate it, Sam. All right, folks, that's Sam Qamar from MedWand, and all of his information will be in the show notes. Appreciate you tuning in.